Before the sun clears the peaks of the Hindu Kush, before the first light touches the frozen ground outside, a woman is already awake. She has been awake for a while. Not because she set an alarm, not because she had somewhere to be by a certain hour, but because the fire inside the house has been dying since the deepest part of the night, and she knows exactly what happens to a family that lets the cold fully take hold. In the highlands of Afghanistan, where winter temperatures in some valleys plunge to minus 25 degrees Celsius and lower, the morning is not a gentle thing. It arrives as a threat, and the first chores of the day are not convenience or routine. They are the family's defense against a world that would, without hesitation, end them. Most people watching this have probably never had to think about fire as a survival mechanism. You wake up, the house is warm, the water runs from a tap, and the day begins. But in the frozen highlands of central and northeastern Afghanistan, particularly across the Hazarajat Plateau and the upper valleys of Badakhshan and Nuristan, none of those things exist in the morning without someone earning them first. The fire has to be rebuilt from near nothing. The water has to be found, thawed, and carried. The animals have to be checked, fed, and sometimes pulled back from the edge of freezing. And all of this has to happen before the rest of the family stirs, before the children rise, before the day can be anything other than survival. What looks from the outside like a simple, even primitive morning routine is actually a masterclass in thermal management, resource economy, and generational knowledge that most modern systems could not replicate. If you are new here and you find these stories of forgotten intelligence fascinating, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. The house itself is the first thing to understand. These are not haphazard structures. In the Afghan highlands, the traditional home, whether constructed of compressed earth, rough stone, or a combination of both, is designed from the ground up as a heat retention system. Walls in high-altitude villages are often between 60 and 90 centimeters thick. That is not because the builders lacked precision. It is because, at these elevations, the thermal mass of a thick earthen wall is the single most important engineering feature a home can have. During the day, that wall slowly absorbs whatever warmth exists inside the structure. During the night, it releases that warmth back into the room over a period of hours, acting as a slow radiator. This is not folk wisdom. It is thermodynamics, applied through centuries of trial and catastrophic error. The roofs of these homes are flat, which surprises many people who expect mountain architecture to favor pitched designs that shed snow. But in the high valleys of Afghanistan, a flat roof is a strategic choice. The accumulated snow on top acts as a layer of insulation, trapping warm air beneath the structure the same way a down blanket traps body heat. Under certain conditions, a roof covered in packed snow can raise the interior temperature of the room below by several critical degrees. The builders knew this not because they read about it, but because the families that built with pitched roofs generations ago were the ones that froze. So the house is already doing work before anyone wakes up. But a house can only retain what was put into it. And that is where the first chore of the morning begins, in the dark, before the family rises, with a single woman crouching beside what remains of the overnight fire. The fire in a Highland Afghan home is not placed arbitrarily. In most traditional structures, the central hearth sits low, often at floor level or just above it, in the middle of the main living space. The family sleeps around it, not beside it, not in adjacent rooms, but physically surrounding it. The logic is circulatory. Heat rises, and in a room with low ceilings, which these homes almost always have, a central fire positioned at floor level heats the air that rises around the people sleeping there, creating a warm envelope of air at human height. The ceiling, packed with dried grass and mud plaster, holds that air in. The walls, still releasing the previous day's warmth, reinforce it from every direction. When it all functions together, a single fire, fed carefully through the night, can maintain a survivable sleeping temperature even when the outside world is a frozen landscape under stars so cold they seem to buzz with it. But fires die. They always die. Keeping a fire alive through the night without burning through the entire fuel supply before morning is one of the most underappreciated skills in Highland survival. In many households, the overnight fire management is handled through a technique that reduces the burn to embers, banking the coals under a layer of ash that acts as insulation. The fire does not go out. It goes quiet. It holds. And when the woman of the house rises before dawn and gently uncovers those coals, blows carefully into the red center, and feeds the flame-dried dung or split wood or compressed dung cakes called tizak, she is not starting a fire from nothing. She is waking something that has been sleeping all night, waiting. This matters enormously. Starting a fire from cold materials in a freezing room with numb fingers and a family depending on the outcome is not the same as striking a match in a warm kitchen. Every Highland household that survives winter has a system. The tinder is prepared the day before. The kindling is stored in a dry corner, not outside where moisture can reach it. The tizak, dried animal dung mixed sometimes with straw or chaff, is stacked within arm's reach of the hearth. Nothing in this system is improvised. The placement of every fuel source is deliberate, because, in the dark and cold of a Highland morning, the distance between the woman's hand and the next piece of fuel must be short. Seconds matter when a fire is fragile and a family is cold. Now, here is where the story deepens. Because rebuilding the fire is only the first problem. The second problem announces itself almost immediately, in a sound that every Highland family knows: the silence of frozen water. In the villages of Afghanistan's high country, there is no municipal water system. Water comes from streams, from springs, from shallow wells dug into the valley floor, and in some cases from channels, called Chores, that bring groundwater up through ancient underground aqueducts. In winter, all of these sources face the same enemy. The surface freezes. The channels ice over. The well rims become treacherous, and the vessel that was left outside the night before, forgotten or simply too heavy to carry in, is now a solid block that will not yield a single drop until someone does something about it. The water chore in a Highland winter morning follows a precise sequence, and it begins before the fire is fully established, because the fire and the water problem are connected. The woman, or in many households an older daughter or son, takes the vessel to the nearest water source, which may be a stream that still runs beneath a skin of ice, a spring that has been kept partially open by consistent use, or a channel that the community has learned to break open each morning before it seals. To get water from a frozen stream, you do not simply crack the surface and dip a vessel. You break a specific point, usually one the community has used for generations, where the current beneath is strong enough that the ice layer stays thin. You work quickly, because wet hands in those temperatures become dangerous in minutes. You fill the vessel, secure it against your body, and carry it back to the house without stopping. If you think that sounds manageable, consider that in many Highland villages, the water source is not at the doorstep. It may be several hundred meters away, along a path that is ice-covered, uneven, and invisible in the pre-dawn dark. The vessel, when full, may weigh 15 to 20 kilograms. The woman carrying it is wearing layered clothing that restricts movement, her breath visible in clouds around her face, her feet finding each step by memory rather than sight. She has done this every morning of every winter of her adult life. That knowledge, that muscular memory, that internal map of every frost-heaved stone on that path is not a small thing. It is years of accumulated intelligence stored in her body, irreplaceable and non-transferable to anyone who has not lived it. Back inside, the fire is now awake. The water goes close to the heat, not directly over it yet, but near enough to begin softening. The family is stirring. And now, the third chore begins, the one that most people watching this would least expect to be morning critical. The animals. In the Afghan Highlands, the relationship between a family and its animals is not sentimental. It is structural. The livestock, whether goats, sheep, cattle, or donkeys, are not kept outside in pens and checked at leisure. In deep winter, many of them are kept inside the home itself, in an attached lower section or a partitioned corner because their body heat contributes meaningfully to the household's thermal balance. A room shared with several animals is warmer than a room without them. This is not an aesthetic choice. It is an engineering solution to the problem of a fire that might not burn all night without consuming more fuel than the family can spare. But animals kept inside need to be managed from the first hours of the day. They need feed, which has been stored in the house precisely because carrying feed from an outdoor storage area in deep snow every single morning is inefficient and dangerous when conditions are worst. They need their water unfrozen too, which means that as the morning water warms near the fire, a portion goes to them before it goes anywhere else. And they need to be checked for signs of cold injury or illness, because a goat that has lost body heat overnight and cannot stand may be lost by afternoon if no one acts quickly. The children, once they are up and moving, are often given this role, not as a task assigned to keep them busy, but because learning to read an animal's body language, to recognize distress, to understand what normal looks like compared to something wrong, is knowledge that a child in these highlands needs to carry into adulthood. The morning chore is also a classroom. If you have been watching this and finding yourself surprised by how layered and intelligent this system actually is, go ahead and like this video. It genuinely helps this channel reach people who have never considered that daily life in the world's most remote places might hold more engineering wisdom than we give it credit for. The meal preparation is the fourth thread woven into the morning, and it does not begin after the fire is established and the water is retrieved and the animals are checked. It begins alongside all of them. In these households, the fire serves multiple functions simultaneously. The flame that heats the room is also the flame that heats the morning meal. In most Highland Afghan kitchens, breakfast is not a separate event with separate fuel. It is a continuation of the fire that was already burning for warmth, with a vessel placed over it at the right moment to make use of the heat that would have been produced regardless. The morning meal is typically simple and calorie-dense. Bread, if it was prepared the day before, or can be quickly baked on the flat iron surface placed over the fire. Dried cheese, dried mulberries or other preserved fruit from autumn. Tea, made strong and often sweetened because the sugar provides fast energy, and the heat of the liquid raises core body temperature faster than food alone. Every element of this meal reflects a principle. In cold environments, the body burns energy faster just to maintain its base temperature, which means that a family working in these conditions needs more calories before they begin the physical labor of the day than a family in a temperate climate would need in a full day of moderate activity. The morning meal is not about flavor or preference. It is about loading the body with the fuel it will burn before midday. The bread deserves its own moment here because it is not a passive element of Highland life. The most common form, a round flat bread baked on a curved iron called a saj, or pressed against the inner walls of a clay oven called a tandoor, requires a specific fire temperature that the woman managing the hearth has learned to judge by sight and sound, not by any measuring tool. She knows when the clay is ready by the way it radiates heat against her hand held at a certain distance. She knows when the bread has finished its first side by the color at the edges and a particular change in the smell of the smoke. This is calibration developed over years of practice, and it is so precisely tuned that the result is consistent despite no two fires ever being exactly identical. Modern ovens have digital thermostats. This woman has something more reliable, a body of knowledge that does not need electricity to function. As the morning progresses and the light finally begins to show over the ridge lines, the family's first chores begin to resolve into a kind of order. The fire is burning steadily. The water vessel has been refilled and is warming. The animals have been fed and checked. The meal is ready, or nearly so. The children who are old enough have each performed some part of this sequence, each one absorbing a layer of the system through participation rather than instruction. And now, for the first time since before dawn, the family is warm, fed, and moving forward. But there is one more thing to address before the day fully opens, and it is the one that people overlook entirely when they think about Highland morning routines: That is the management of fuel. The tezak and the firewood that sustain a Highland Afghan family through a winter are not resources that appear. They are the result of months of work done in the warmer seasons, collecting, drying, stacking, calculating. A family that enters winter without enough fuel does not simply experience discomfort. They die. This is not hyperbole. This is the historical record of Highland life. Every winter, the fuel stored since autumn is being consumed at a rate the household has to track. Not with written ledgers, but with the continuous mental arithmetic of survival. How much is left? How many weeks remain? Is the rate of consumption sustainable? Is there a way to reduce the amount burned per night without dropping the temperature below the level the children can safely sleep through? This calculation runs in the background of every morning. The woman banking the fire in the dark is not just keeping the family warm right now, she is making a decision about the future. Every piece of tezak she burns this morning is a piece that will not be available in February, when the cold deepens and the stored reserves are at their lowest point before the spring thaw. The way she builds the fire, the size of the flame she allows, the timing of when she adds the next piece of fuel is not arbitrary. It is resource management at a level of precision that most people who have never experienced scarcity cannot easily imagine. There is a practice in some Highland households of maintaining what could be described as a fuel emergency reserve, a separate, hidden stack of tezak or wood that is never touched during the ordinary rhythm of winter, only in a genuine crisis, a prolonged storm that makes resupply impossible, an illness in the family that increases the need for heat, a week so cold that normal calculations break down. This reserve is replenished each autumn before the rest of the supply. It is the family's last line of protection, and the fact that it exists means that someone, at some point in that family's history, learned through hard experience what happens when there is nothing left. This is the intelligence that hides inside a morning routine. What looks like a woman getting up early to start a fire is actually the tip of a system that runs 12 months a year, that involves every member of the family at every age, that integrates the architecture of the home, the biology of the animals, the chemistry of the fuel, the hydrology of the water source, and the nutritional needs of human bodies working in extreme cold. There is no single part of the morning that is not connected to every other part. Pull one thread, and the whole fabric shifts. There are villages in the Afghan Highlands that have maintained this system across more than 300 years of continuous habitation, through invasions, famines, political upheavals, and climate fluctuations. They are still there, the same valleys, the same thick-walled homes, the same pre-dawn routines. The knowledge has passed from grandmother to mother to daughter, and from grandfather to son to grandson, not as written doctrine, but as lived practice, performed daily, corrected through observation, refined through consequence. No manual exists, no certification program, no external authority validates it. The only test is whether the family is still alive and warm when spring arrives. And here is the reversal that this story has been building toward, the thing that reframes everything you have just watched. When aid organizations have come into these regions in recent decades with prefabricated structures, modern stoves, and imported fuel supplies, they have sometimes found that the families using those systems struggled more in extreme winters than the families using the traditional ones. The prefabricated structure, optimized for a temperate climate, lost heat faster than the thick earthen walls it replaced. The modern stove, without the thermal mass of a clay hearth, could not hold a slow, overnight burn as efficiently. The imported fuel, when supply chains were disrupted by weather or conflict, simply ran out, with no local replacement system in place. The traditional home, by contrast, was resilient precisely because it was made of local materials, powered by local fuel, and operated by people who had internalized its logic so completely that they could improvise within it under any condition. That is not an argument against development, or against improving the material conditions of life in these communities. It is something more specific than that. It is the observation that a system shaped by 3 centuries of consequence-based learning contains information that is not always visible in a technical assessment, and that the morning routine of a Highland Afghan family beginning in the dark with a dying fire and a frozen world outside, is the surface expression of something far deeper than it first appears. By the time the sun reaches the valley floor and the light turns the snow from blue to gold, the family's first chores are complete. The fire will not need attention for hours. The water is ready. The animals are settled. The children have eaten. The day can begin. From the outside, this morning looks like poverty. It looks like hardship, like limitation, like a life defined by what it lacks. But that reading misses the architecture hidden inside the routine. What this family has built, generation by generation, chore by chore, fire by fire, is a survival system of extraordinary sophistication, one that does not require infrastructure, does not depend on supply chains, and does not fail when the grid goes down, because there was never a grid to begin with. There is a kind of mastery in that, a kind of intelligence that the modern world has largely traded away for convenience, without fully understanding what it was giving up. If this story changed the way you see daily life in the world's remote places, leave a comment below. Tell us which community, which traditional house, which forgotten survival system, or which Highland people you want us to explore next. Subscribe if you have not already, because the stories we cover next are ones that most people will never find on their own, and you will not want to miss them.